Your phone's weather app is guessing. I mean that plainly, not as an insult. That's literally what a forecast is, a probability pulled from a model built for a region the size of a county, and it has no idea what's actually happening over the specific stretch of water or sky above your head right now. A sailor 200 years ago had no app, no satellite, no radar loop to refresh every 10 minutes, and he still had to know with real confidence whether a storm was 6 hours out or 2 days out, because getting it wrong could cost him his ship and his crew. By the end of this, you'll know 10 of the actual signs sailors read off the sky, the water, and the air itself. The same signs that still hold up today, no signal required. My name's Robert Barry, 31 years at sea, merchant marine, and before that, 4 years crewing tall ships out of New England, where you learn fast that a captain who waits on a forecast instead of reading the deck under his own feet is a captain who gets caught out. I've watched the sky turn on men who trusted a clear morning too much, and I've watched old hands call a blow 18 hours before it showed up on any instrument, just by the feel of the wind on the back of their neck. None of this is mysticism. Every single one of these is physics. And once you know what you're looking for, you'll start seeing it everywhere, on the coast, on a lake, even standing in your own backyard. 1. Red sky at night, red sky in morning. You've heard the rhyme. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in morning, sailor take warning. It's not folklore dressed up to sound clever. It's genuine atmospheric physics. In the middle latitudes, weather generally moves west to east. A red sky at sunset means the setting sun is lighting up dust and moisture in clear air to your west, which is usually your incoming weather. So clear skies are on their way to you. A red sky at sunrise means that same clear, dry air has already passed, and what's lighting up red to your east is moisture and instability moving in from the west, headed straight for you. It's not perfect. Weather doesn't read a script, but across generations of sailors watching the same sky every single day, it held up often enough to become one of the most trusted rules in the business. 2. Watch the high clouds before you watch anything else. Long before rain ever reaches you, thin, wispy clouds called cirrus, sailors called them mare's tails, start streaking across the upper sky, usually a full day or two ahead of a front. If those wisps start thickening and lowering, turning into a hazy sheet that dims the sun, you're watching a warm front announce itself hours before the barometer even twitches. A sailor who only looked down at the water and never up at the sky was always the last man to know a storm was coming. Get in the habit of checking the highest clouds in the sky first thing every morning, not the ones right over your head. 3. Learn to read a wind shift, not just a wind speed. This is the one most people never learn, and it's more useful than almost anything else on this list. A wind that backs, meaning it shifts counterclockwise from, say, southeast toward east, then northeast, is a classic sign of an approaching low-pressure system and generally worsening weather. A wind that veers, shifting clockwise, southeast toward south, then southwest, usually signals high pressure building in and improving conditions. Stand still for 2 minutes. Feel where the wind's coming from, and check again in an hour. The direction it's turning tells you more about what's coming than the strength ever will. 4. A ring around the sun or moon means rain is roughly a day or two out. That halo comes from sunlight or moonlight bending through ice crystals in a thin, high layer of cloud called cirrostratus, and that particular cloud is one of the most reliable early markers of an approaching frontal system in the whole sky. Sailors would count the stars visible inside that ring as a rough gauge of how much moisture was building up there. Fewer visible stars, meaning a thicker, wetter layer moving in. You don't need the star count to be exact to use the basic rule. If you see a halo tonight, expect a change within a day or two. 5. Pay attention to the swell before the wind ever picks up. This one saved more ships than almost anything on this list. A long ocean swell, a slow, rolling wave pattern arriving from a direction different than the local wind, is energy traveling ahead of a distant storm system, sometimes hundreds of miles ahead of it. A sailor who noticed the swell direction shifting, or a new long-period swell arriving out of nowhere on an otherwise calm day, knew weather was coming his way long before he could feel it in the wind or see it in the sky. If you're near open water and you notice the wave pattern change character, even though the local breeze hasn't, that's your early warning. 6. Trust the drop in pressure your own body can feel. Sailors without a barometer still had one built in, more or less. A fast drop in barometric pressure is well documented to cause real physical effects in a lot of people: popping ears, sinus pressure, joint aches in anyone prone to them. This isn't old wives' talk. It's a genuinely studied phenomenon, and plenty of experienced hands learn to trust a dull ache in an old injury as reliably as they trusted an actual gauge. If you don't have a barometer, and most of you reading this don't, pay attention the next time your ears feel a little off or an old joint starts complaining for no clear reason. It might just be the air itself telling you something's dropping fast. 7. Watch what the birds are doing, not just the sky. Seabirds generally won't fly far from shore, or won't fly at all when they sense a serious low-pressure system approaching, because rough seas make feeding difficult and dangerous for them. If you notice gulls and other seabirds moving inland, roosting early, or clustering unusually low and tight together, that's a real behavioral signal, not superstition. Birds are remarkably sensitive to pressure changes and will often react hours before a human notices anything different. On the flip side, swallows and other birds flying low, close to the ground, or water-chasing insects, is often tied to lower air pressure, pushing insects down closer to the surface. Another small tell that conditions are shifting. 8. Watch your smoke if you've got a fire going. This is an old trick, but it still works exactly the way it always did. Smoke that rises in a clean, mostly straight column tells you the air is stable and pressure is steady, generally a sign fair weather is holding. Smoke that flattens out, spreads sideways, or gets pushed down close to the ground instead of climbing tells you pressure is falling and the air is becoming unstable, often a sign of weather moving in within the next several hours. If you're at a campsite or your own backyard fire pit, it's worth a glance before you settle in for the evening. 9. Seaweed and pine cones aren't just decoration, they're crude hygrometers. Dried seaweed hung somewhere shaded will stay stiff and brittle in dry air and go noticeably limp and damp feeling as humidity rises ahead of rain, because seaweed is naturally very responsive to moisture in the air around it. Pine cones do something similar on land. Their scales close up tight when humidity rises and open back up in dry conditions, which is actually the same mechanism the tree uses to control seed release based on moisture. Neither one is going to give you a precise forecast, but both are a genuinely real physical response to rising humidity, and rising humidity very often means rain isn't far behind. 10. The flat, eerie calm is the one that should worry you most. An unusually still, quiet period, especially after a day of steady wind, isn't always a sign that good weather has settled in. Sometimes it's the calm that sits just ahead of a fast-developing system, particularly with certain kinds of storms that draw air inward before their full force arrives. Old sailors treated a sudden dead calm with suspicion rather than relief, especially if it followed building clouds or a falling glass. If everything goes unnaturally still and quiet after a day that had real wind and weather building, that's not necessarily the all clear. It might be the pause before the real weather shows up. None of these 10 on their own is a guarantee. That's the honest truth of it. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you a pine cone is more reliable than a modern weather satellite, because it isn't. What I will tell you is that stacking 2 or 3 of these together, a backing wind, a halo around the moon, seabirds pulling in tight to shore, gave an experienced sailor a genuinely reliable read on what was coming, often earlier than any instrument could have told him, and long before any app existed to tell him at all. That's the real skill here, not memorizing 10 facts, but learning to read several signs together and trust the pattern they're all pointing toward. Here's why I think this actually matters, beyond curiosity. A phone forecast is built off a model covering a wide area, updated on its own schedule, and it can miss what's happening in your exact cove, your exact ridge line, your exact stretch of coast, especially with fast-developing local weather. It's also worth exactly nothing the moment you lose signal, which tends to happen at the worst possible time, out on the water, deep in the backcountry, or in the middle of a storm, knocking out the very towers your signal depends on. The sky, the wind, the swell, none of that has ever needed a signal to keep working. Learning to read it isn't nostalgia. It's a backup system that never goes down. If you want to start practicing this without waiting for open water, you can build the habit anywhere. Step outside every morning for the next week before you check your phone, and just look up. Note the highest clouds first. Note which way the wind's actually coming from, not which way you assume it is, and write down what you see. Then check what actually happened that afternoon and evening. Do that for 2 weeks, and you'll start noticing patterns your eye picks up faster than you'd expect, because your brain is built to catch this stuff once you start paying attention to it on purpose. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 you'd already noticed without knowing what it meant. I'd bet a good number of you have felt an old ache before a storm, or noticed the birds acting strange the day before a front rolled through without ever putting a name to it. I read every one of these. And if you're near open water yourself, tell me what local signs you've picked up over the years that I didn't cover here, because every coastline teaches its own version of this, and I'd like to hear what yours has taught you. Next time, I want to walk you through how a crew read the color and texture of the water itself, the difference between a safe channel and a shoal, before charts were ever accurate enough to trust completely, because knowing what the water's telling you was just as important as knowing what the sky was telling you. Until then, look up before you look down at your phone, and remember, the weather's never once needed a signal to make itself known to a man paying attention.